One of the more contrived controversies recently is the one about institutional racism. Um, the study of institutions has been around since Max Weber in the last century. Um, Structural functionalism has existed for at least 40 years before I studied sociology. In any event, the power brokers in this country would like everybody to believe that racism is institutional and that the only institutional thing is racism. And the reason that many blacks are getting a raw deal is the fact that there's institutional racism. Well, I think it's a deliberate misinformation ploy by the propagandists to divert our attention away from the fact that what we have is institutionalized fascism. It's not just that the blacks are discriminated against institutionally, it's everyone other than the power elite is. And they would just soon like us to believe that we're with them as the ordinary white peasant, but we're not. We have more in common with the black peasant than we do the white peasant, except for the fact that we can all aspire to be a white slave owner or a white billionaire or whatever, and the odds of that happening are much more realistic than to a black person. But it doesn't change the fact that we are in a system that's sort of rigged against the average person, particularly the middle class person. Occasionally you'll see somebody that will be an anomaly and contrary to that rule. The same as you might say that occasionally you'll read about a lottery winner that wins several $1 million, or a college football player that gets a multi-million-dollar football or baseball player contract. The odds against that are so astronomical, it's stupid to compute it even. So what we can do is we can force blacks against whites by saying the system is institutionally racist, when in fact it's institutionally rigged for the rich. But we don't think about that. We think about we're being threatened by blacks with our jobs, etc. And this has been the case over centuries in our law system. Take the so-called White Slave Act. That's how they regulate us. That's how they instill fear in us. They make us afraid of various things. And one of the things that they did with the drug laws was they indoctrinated, propagandized the white people that their daughters would all become hookers and go out and have sex with black men because that's what heroin did, and that's how the prostitution thing got started, and that's why you have the White Slave Act and things like this. There wasn't a Black Slave Act, it was a White Slave Act, and because you were forcing women, allegedly, into doing sexual maneuvers for the benefit of the Johns. Well, that is just one example. But there are several circumstances in which the discrimination just isn't against black. The institutionalized inequity isn't just against black, it's against all people not born of privilege. That is something that we should address, and we should not allow the propagandists to divide us when the issue is rich versus poor rather than black versus white. I am still today convinced that Martin Luther King would be alive had he kept talking about black versus white, but when he went into labor politics and started talking about the economics of rich versus poor, he became more dangerous. The same way with the Black Panther Party, when they became more attuned to the politics of poverty, they became more dangerous too. They weren't just black leaders, they weren't black organizers, they were advocates of black socialism, not just socialism for blacks, but socialism for everyone. They wanted redistribution of wealth, they wanted redistribution of power, and that made them a dangerous foe. And as long as the power elite had people like J. Edgar Hoover to enforce their prejudices, the Panthers were bound to lose. So I think we should reflect on this. I think we should think about it. I think we should take a look at the semantics, what's going on. Is there such a thing as black institutional racism? Of course there is. But is it just applying to black? No. It applies to most people that can't afford to join country clubs, buy sports cars, live in fancy houses, prairie mansions, etc., that have to belong to unions to have their rights protected or to have their ability to make a living protected. That's what this is about more than anything. And that's what we should look at. We shouldn't allow the rulers to divide us so they can conquer us. We shouldn't allow them to squeeze our middle class into non-existence, blaming the black radicals when everybody's getting squeezed. We should start using our heads and start thinking. And that's enough for my rant today. Oh, by the way, I in my blog, I talked about how institutionalized fascism or capitalism, or whatever you want to call it, mainly fascism, has taken over. I wrote an article about the driving while ability impaired and how they were making up probable cause to write tickets for that by inventing what they call green tongue. So they would have people stick out their tongues, and it couldn't be verified or anything, but they'd say there was a green coating on it, therefore they had probable cause to suspect the person was driving under the influence of drugs, namely marijuana, and they wouldn't lose the revenue when the medical marijuana thing came into being. Well, hope you read it. Bye.